Hey, what's up, and welcome back to the Relationship School's Smart Couple podcast. I'm your host, Jayson Gaddis. Grateful to be here. What is happening? Hey, I want to thank you, the listener. We've got a lot of great reviews on iTunes, and I want to encourage you to leave one if you haven't already. And I want to thank a couple. Here's one from C. Andy. I found this podcast to be life-changing and life-shaping. That's kind of cool. And then check this one out from Rots89. Have an issue in your relationship? Chances are it's covered somewhere in this podcast. This cutting-edge relationship advice that is street-level, non-cliched, smart, challenging, yet somehow common sense and straightforward. I think I've listened to every episode the past couple of years, and I owe a debt of gratitude to Mr. Gaddis for this podcast. Thanks, Rots89. I love how iTunes everybody's got a funky nickname. So thank you guys for all your support out there as we continue to truck along here with excellent relationship wisdom for your love life. All right, I always like to set context. Remember, this podcast is about growing through relationship so that you can have an awesome long-term relationship. It's about marriage, monogamy, and long-term partnership. It's for anyone that's in that conversation. Now, because I'm a straight white guy, I use language that's comes from that place, and it's not meant to exclude anyone. Although I understand and appreciate if someone feels that way. I'm just talking about my own experience often as a white heterosexual married guy, okay, with kids. Fairly traditional setup that I've got going here. And I want to succeed year in and year out in this long-term partnership game, and I'm motivated to do so, and I'm sharing with you what I'm learning along the way, and I'm interviewing lots of experts, love leaders, couples, individuals, my wife, in attempts to help you and me get more empowered in our long-term relationships, okay? That's what we're about here. All right, in this episode, I am pumped because I've got one of my mentors that I met way back in 2013 who was introduced to me by none other than my wife, Ellen. When I met Dr. John Demartini, my life completely changed. And if you haven't heard this guy talk or seen him in person or gone to a breakthrough experience, I recommend you do so because he is a powerhouse. He's considered a polymath, which basically just means a really smart dude. And really, polymath to me means he synthesizes all these different ologies and sciences, from quantum physics to psychology to theology to biology, ecology, and so many other sciences, astrology, into a really synthesized universal teaching and transmission. It's like pretty unbelievable. And what's amazing about this character is he wears a business suit and tie every day and travels the world nonstop. He likes to say that he's homeless. And he seriously speaks about 360 days a year. He works every single weekend of the year teaching his breakthrough experience. And the guy is just a machine, all right? People call him the fire hose, and if you get in arm's length of this character, he's going to mow you down with a lot of wisdom. All right, so hopefully this episode will shift a paradigm for you or leave a little crack in the facade of how you see the world and perhaps add a deeper layer to it, because there's just no other way to slice it up here. I ask you to rewind this at least once, maybe twice, on the sections that you feel drawn to. Now, I just gave myself permission to ask him anything I wanted, because he's not just a relationship guy. That's actually one narrow slice of what he does. He's a quantum physics guy. He's a successful, financially free investor. And he's got a lot to say about every area of life. And I'm into mastering my life. That's why I study with people like John. We talked about psychology and physiology. We talked about past lives and some other new age topics. We talked about spirituality and enlightenment. We talked about values, childhood attachment, human development, the one versus the many, and even money and the economy. So this is pretty rich for you personal growth geeks out there. Now, I did this interview in person, which was fun for me. I want to do more in-person interviews. So I drove to Denver, which is not far from Boulder. But in John's busy schedule, that was kind of hard to do. And he agreed to meet with me for an hour. So we got into it. We went over an hour. And this guy could just keep going and going. And I could have hung there for hours as well. But obviously, I want to respect the character's time. And I don't know that you would listen for 4 hours if that's how long this podcast was. But this is going to give you a slice and a window into what's possible in life, all right, this interview. So big, broad range here, from spirituality to money and to relationships. We covered a lot of ground. So I really hope you enjoy this one, okay? All right, stay tuned to the end, as always, for your action step. What's up, and welcome to the Smart Couple podcast, brought to you by the Relationship School. I've got one of my main mentors here, Dr. John Demartini. Welcome, John.
Thanks. Thank you for having me.
Yeah. So really grateful to get a little time with you and mine that giant brain. In this interview, I want to cover a lot of ground and move kind of all over the place. So the first place I want to start is with your values work. And, a lot of people, when I talk about the values with other people, there's two challenges. One person will say, yeah, but I don't really know what my life purpose is. And I'm doing a job I don't like. So that's not my life purpose. I'm destined to be doing something else. So will you give us a little, speak to that person who feels stuck and lost with their life purpose? Because that's a pretty common pain point. And how the values can help them. And when they get stuck with the values and they think it can't help them, what do they need to do?
Okay. Every individual has a unique set of priorities, set of values, things that are most to least important in their life. Whatever's highest on their list of values, they are spontaneously inspired to fulfill. But as they go progressively down to lower values, things that are less important, they will require outside motivation, incentive, and reminders to get them to do things. Like a young boy who loves his video games doesn't need to be reminded or motivated, but to do his chores or his homework he might need to.
Yeah.
So each individual has something that is the highest. Now that could vary between different people, and whatever's highest could be a spiritual quest, it could be a mind development quest, it could be a business quest, it could be a financial quest, it could be a family quest, social quest, or physical fitness quest. Mm-hmm. Nobody's right or wrong for whatever those values are, but most people think their values are right, and other people's that are similar are sort of right, and those that are quite different are probably perceived as wrong.
Right.
We tend to project our values onto people, and we tend to want others to help us fulfill our values. That can lead to some challenges. Mm-hmm. But whatever's highest, the very highest, we are spontaneously inspired to do, and that is what our purpose, our mission, the most meaningful, the most inspiring, the most fulfilling things that we could be doing with our life is that top one. So the purpose is that.
Yeah.
Now, the reason why people are not clear about what that is because many times they compare their lives to other people, minimize themselves to others that they think have more than them, more intelligence, more success, more wealth, more family interaction, more social leadership, more physical fitness, or more spiritual awareness. The moment that they minimize themselves to others, subordinate to others, they have a tendency to go, I wish I was like them. Mm-hmm. And they tend to then, in that subordination, inject other people's values into their life, and it may be more than one person, which clouds the clarity of what is really calling them, that highest value in their own life.
Okay.
And as a result of it, they start to doubt or question what they're really committed to. But because every decision a person makes is based on what they believe will give them the greatest advantage over disadvantage, greatest reward over risk at any moment, they are still acting in accordance with their highest value, but attempting to act in other people's values. And they have expectations that are sometimes based on other people's values, and then they start doubting and questioning what they actually are doing and what they're committed to. Mm-hmm. But their life demonstrates their purpose. Their life demonstrates what their real values are. So when somebody's doing a job that they say it's not, I hate doing it, I really want to be doing something else, and they have this fantasy about doing this other thing, but they're not taking action on it, and they're not actually making it happen, which a lot of people. It's because they're not realizing that that job that they have right now is somehow fulfilling what they are valuing. They don't know what that value is. They keep comparing it to other people. And it may not be the job. It may be that it's bringing financial security. It's may being a stepping stone in their mind on where they want to go. But until they perceive more advantage and disadvantage going after what they say is important, they won't. Because they'll make decisions according to what they think is still going to get more advantage. You see people in relationships that say, this thing is killing me, I got to get out of this thing. And 5 years later, they're still saying that. But they're in there because they still have unconscious motives to stay there. So many people are, because of the comparisons, are not conscious of what their real values are and don't realize why they keep doing what they do that's actually fulfilling those highest values. And then they have fantasies and unrealistic expectations that they're going to live outside those values. And they have these ideals about, oh, I want to be doing this. I see this in financial independence. I asked a whole audience, 10,000 people, how many of you want to be financially independent? Everybody puts a hand up. But 0.3 to 0.8% of the room actually obtain it. So what they think they want and what they actually are demonstrating in their behaviors are two different things. The people that really want to have financial independence are making sure that their money, when they receive it from their work, is going into assets that put money back in their pocket and it's appreciating in value. They're not buying consumables, immediate gratifying consumables that depreciate. Because otherwise they're going to be working for their money and building up a lifestyle that's going to erode the possibility of financial independence. So the same thing in relationships. People say they want something in business or in their relationships, but I don't go by what they say. I go by what their life demonstrates.
What they're doing every day.
What they're doing every day, because their decisions are based on their real values. And most people are not conscious of what those are, and they're not conscious of the fantasies that they're imposing on themselves because of the injected values of others. And they don't have a strategy to actually build what they really want. And so they're going to those other secondary things because they don't have a strategy.
Okay, so let's say I'm Joe Blow and I work at X corporation, and I feel unfulfilled in my heart. I feel like it's pretty deadening to me. And I claim I really want to write a book and do this thing, but I don't take action. So I'm demonstrating every day that it's actually financial security maybe is more important than my dream of writing a book. Is that an example?
Well, if they don't have a strategy on how writing a book is going to give them more financial security than what they have right now, they'll keep procrastinating on the book if financial security is what's really the reason why they're actually at work. So if you sit down with them, and they say, I want to write a book, but they have no history of writing a book. There's no practice writing a book. They're not organizing a book. They're not taking action on it. I would probably confront that and say, are you sure? It's not real. I don't see any evidence of it. But it could be that they don't see a strategy. They haven't planned out a strategy that allows them to give them more an advantage doing that than what they're doing now. And as long as they don't have that strategy, they don't have foresight and plan that out, it's not likely to occur. And they'll think that there's something wrong with them. They'll think they're sabotaging. They'll think they're, there's excuses or something. But when somebody really, 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 really has a value on something and it's highest, and they pursue it, they activate, the blood glucose and oxygen goes into the executive center of the brain, the forebrain, and they usually see strategic plans to get there. They see a vision, they get a plan going, and they get into execution, and they tend to govern themselves to get that outcome. So when somebody doesn't show any evidence of doing something, I really degrade it as a real probability of having that as a value.
And this seems to be, I think this is really common. I mean, I think this is most people.
This is the reason why I put the book together, The Values Factor, because I saw consistently people living in a delusion and unrealistic expectations and fantasies about how they're supposed to be or how life's supposed to be or how they're supposed to live. But I go by what they do. I look at my own life. I'm a researcher and a writer and a traveler and a teacher. And I teach every day. And I write pretty well every day. I'm working on it this morning. I've been doing interviews and I did a webinar the day. I mean, I'm constantly teaching it. So my life demonstrates that. So I can make up stuff, but if I look at what my life demonstrates and what is real meaning in it and why I'm really doing it, it tells me what my values are. So I had a lady, I have to share this. I had a lady in London who was at the Breakthrough Experience program, which I do as my signature program. And she said on a Sunday afternoon, it's a 2-day program, so it's a weekend. So Sunday afternoon, she says, Dr. Demartini, I don't know what my purpose is. And I said, okay, so what do you do every single day that nobody has to remind you to do, that you're inspired to do, that you love doing, that you do every day, like clockwork, and nothing seems to get you distracted from it, and you just do it, and you're inspired by it. Mm-hmm. She goes, I don't know anything. I said, look carefully, everybody's got it. What do you do every day? Now, the reason why she hesitated to answer that first and says, I don't have it, is because she's comparing herself to everybody else, and it's not matching anybody else's that she's admiring. So she's degrading and devaluing what she's actually doing. And I said, I'm not interested in your comparison of what you think you should be, what it ought to be, what it's supposed to be, what your imperatives. I'm interested in what you do every day that nobody has to remind you to do. And I said, now get present with that because you have it. Look carefully. And she stopped and she goes, it's being with my children. I love taking care of my children. I am a mother. And I said, so that's what you do. But I should be doing this. I ought to be doing this. I keep sabotaging from this. And what she was doing is she had 3 friends. One was social savvy, one was business savvy, one was financial savvy. And they were all independent women. And she was thinking, I should be doing what they're doing. Yeah. Yeah. And therefore, the infatuation with that was making her diminish her value on her own values and thinking that I should be doing that. And whenever you hear I should, I ought to, I supposed to, I got to, I have to, I must, it ain't you. Because otherwise, if it's you, it's I love to. So when I made her stop and realize that and said, take that away, what do you do every day? And she says, I take care of my kids. And then she said, is that good enough? And I said, Rose Kennedy from the Kennedy family, her mission statement was, I dedicate my life to raising a family of world leaders. She was a mother, a committed mother. And she got watery-eyed and she says, that's all I've ever wanted to do. Mm-hmm. And she says, is that enough? And I looked at her and I said, inside your heart, you want to raise a beautiful family of children, a beautiful family. So that's all I've ever wanted to do. I said, it's time to give yourself permission to be you. Yeah. And she just broke down in tears. I said, you've been comparing yourself to these people you think have a better life, but they don't have a better life. They have a different life. Mm-hmm. And as long as you compare yourself to them and live in their shadows instead of stand on the shoulders of people who live authentically, you're going to miss out on the magnificence of who you are and you're going to shrink. Yeah. And you're going to be a cat expecting to be able to swim, or you're going to be a fish expecting to be able to climb. And you're not going to honor yourself, and then you're going to lie to yourself because of the internal conflict you're having inside. You're going to lie to yourself about what's important.
Yeah, amazing. Okay, and so one other little tip there I heard was, if I'm at the shit job, let's say, and I'm judging it, instead of resenting it, I got to see how it's serving me in what I care about, right? That it's on the way.
Yeah, well, first I want to define what that highest value is.
Yeah.
So I developed the hierarchy of value determining process to determine what a person's real value is, what their life demonstrates. Mm-hmm. Then I would be asking, because nobody goes to work for the sake of a job. They go to work to fulfill what they value most. Mm-hmm. And if they can't see how what they value is going to be fulfilled at their work, they're going to be unfulfilled. But they may not know what that really is. They may be fantasizing about what it's supposed to be.
Yeah.
So the real truth is the guy's probably getting financial security there. That's why he's been there.
Yeah.
But he's not honoring that.
Right.
He's comparing it to these fantasies that he's supposed to be writing books, being a famous speaker or something like that, right?
Yeah.
But the reality is that financial security is higher on his values than being a speaker. He'd be writing books all the time.
Yeah.
You know, I've been writing books since I was 23.
Right.
So I have a value on that. But he may have that as a value, or he may have other motives, social interaction or something, or maybe because he wants to please his parents and that's their company. Who knows what it is?
Yeah.
But we need to find out what his real value is, and then we need to ask a very simple question. How specifically is the job that he's got right now helping him fulfill what he values most? Mm-hmm. Okay. Because if he stacks up enough reasons, enough benefits according to his real values, he can become engaged and inspired in that work temporarily until he can either delegate things that aren't inspiring, or he can get a plan in action on what's next for his life. And then ask, how is this temporary job helping him do the next step?
Yeah.
That's the wisest thing you can do if you know where you're going to go, to ask, how is this job going to help you get there?
Okay, great, thank you. All right, so jumping a little bit, similarly, like last night you talked about these 4 feedback mechanisms, and I just want you to touch on, really condensed version of the connection between our psychology and our physiology when we basically your take on symptoms of disease, illness, sickness, and why our culture is so sick.
Well, when we live according to our highest value, we tend to be more objective. We tend to embrace both pleasure and pain equally in the pursuit of what's most meaningful to us. The word meaning means the mean between these two polarities. Aristotle called it eudaimonia. But when we're not living according to our own highest values consciously, I mean, we actually are, but we're not honoring it, like we were just talking about.
Yeah.
The unfulfillment that we have makes us look for immediate gratification to compensate for it. So we're looking for a pleasure and trying to avoid a pain. And we're vulnerable to the ideologies of selling hedonistic outcomes, pleasure without pain, happy without sad, positive without negative, these one-sided worlds. Well, anytime you're striving for a one-sided world in a two-sided world, you're going to end up feeling defeated. Yeah. The Buddha said that the desire for that which is not available and the desire to avoid that which is unavoidable is a source of human suffering. So we suffer anytime we're trying to get a one-sided outcome. But that's what we do when we're not consciously living congruent with what our values are, highest value. Yeah. So what happens is when a person is in that mode, instead of being in the executive center, the highest levels of the brain, when you're living by your highest values, you're in a more inner part of the brain, a more older part of the brain, the amygdala. And when you do, you're more volatile and you're functioning from a predator-prey kind of energy, a stress and bliss kind of illusion. And our physiology responds according to those extremes. So if you're perceiving that you're challenged, it tends to subjectively bias and accentuate that into more than it actually is. And when you tend to be going after something you think is pleasurable, it tends to go into high infatuations. And these high infatuations, these high resentment states that we build, these prey-predator responses, impulse and instinct responses, create physiological imbalances, parasympathetic excess or sympathetic excess in the autonomics, which go down to the cells and the cell walls with those transmitters, cause epigenetic changes, enzymatic and then epigenetic changes, acetylation for parasympathetic, methylation for sympathetic, changes in the actual genes themselves, the histones around them, and also the cascading of building of proteins from that. And it alters physiology and therefore alters cells, which then we label as illness and disease. And the illness and disease, if understood in applied physiological light, gives us an insight of what actually those symptoms are representing psychologically. Mm-hmm. So there's no way you can have a physiological imbalance without a psychological component. They correlate together. I've spent the last 40-something years mapping those out and looking at the physiology, studying enzymology, studying these transmitters and things, trying to find out what these patterns are. And there's no doubt. But what happens is it's too complex for the average person to master. Mm-hmm. The medical profession and some other professions, sometimes they want a quick fix. Here, just take a pill. Pharmaceutical companies very commonly run that. And so people are just told you have a biochemical imbalance here, take this and everything will be fine. Problem is that that's symptomatically changing, but it's not getting down to the core of what's going on, and it doesn't give the person their power back. And it robs them, in a sense, of any form of causal correlation between their symptomatology and their behavior. Yeah. And they're not seeing how their perceptions could actually change their life. So I developed the methodology, the Demartini method, to bypass that shunt, you might say, and to get in there and actually balance out the perceptions in the first place, mm-hmm. which balances out the chemistry, which then symptomatology changes as a feedback to let you know it's balanced again. The symptoms go away.
Would you say it's mostly true or always true that our symptoms then are positive or intelligent feedback systems to get us back to center?
Well, I don't know. I can't say that every symptom I've ever studied, I've confirmed and seen the pathway. Okay. But every one that I have figured out, I'd say yes. Okay. Because what happens is there are unconscious motives many times to get response. I've seen this. I mean, we all know kids, if they're at school and they don't want to go to school because of bullying or something like that, they'll get a stomach ache or they'll come up with symptoms sometimes like that, and they don't want to go back, and it's a strategy. Or you see a kid that's running down the street, he bruised himself, he's running down the street, running home, he's not crying, he gets to the front door, mommy opens the door, and now he cries. Mm-hmm. And then mommy goes and gives him ice cream and things, and we're trained into using symptomatology to get our events accomplished, or what we want, and our strategies many times. So some of these are strategic, some of these are just psychological imbalances, but I'm going to say that We just haven't found them all yet. They're correlated. Because I've seen genetic alteration. We now know we can epigenetically alter even genes. And we now, and not just the expression, but the actual arrangement of the genome itself is now epigenetically alterable. And we know that we have more power in our thoughts, in our perceptions than we realize. You only have three things you really have control in your life: your perceptions, your decisions, and your actions. All three of them are correlated with symptomatology.
Yeah.
So if we can go in there and actually learn what our symptoms are doing, study the applied physiology, get feedback on it, we can uncover our own sources of our own so-called illness, which may not even be an illness. It may be just the strategic mechanisms of the body to try to wake you up to your imbalanced perspectives.
Yeah. How much of the epigenetic stuff is, like, let's say I'm a really healthy person, everything's totally cool with me, and all of a sudden I'm 45 and I start having nightmares and these symptoms, and maybe I have dreams of the Holocaust, and there's just new stuff, and you go to maybe a practitioner and they might say, oh, that's a past life that's emerging. Will you say something about the difference between like the past life sort of label of symptoms now arising? And I actually, like, for example, for me, during an ayahuasca ceremony once, I had this whole download vision that I was being dragged by my arms by a horse, behind a horse, and my shoulders were dislocated. Well, it turns out I have chronically dislocating shoulders. My dad had chronically dislocating shoulders. My brother dislocated his shoulders. What's going on there?
Well, if you have a easily lineage in a family of dislocated shoulders, the first thing you want to do is look at the glenoid fossa and see if there's a very small cap of the glenoid fossa where your arm can easily be dislocated. It may just be an anatomical thing that's genetically there, and you're passing down a genetic pattern in your fossa. Because people have a good deep fossa may not dislocate as easily, but one has a shallow fossa, that may be a factor.
Okay.
So it may be that. It may not be because
Sure.
of incarnation. I don't go to reincarnation as my first thought, because many times I've found that that's not the case. But I can't rule it out. I can't say that that may not be a factor sitting in there. But I can't guarantee that you reincarnated. I may just say that somebody who had a genetic code passed on a gene code through a vertical transmission to your parents, and they passed it on to you, certain patterns. And in there, not only gene patterns, but also epigenetic patterns. We know that that goes at least 3 generations. It's able to be going 3 generations. So we could have epigenetic information. And that epigenetic information are impulses and instincts that will carry on from the next generation that could be stored. But it may not be a reincarnation. It may just be stored information sitting in the genome and then into the psyche.
Wakes up.
Yeah, so I don't want to jump to a conclusion that it's a thing, because we have a hard time understanding how emotions, which are primarily bodily sensations based on imbalanced perspectives, are carried from life to life.
Yeah.
That's a questionable construct.
Okay.
But with the idea of something that's more immortal than that, more love and wisdom oriented, maybe so. So I could go for an hour or two on that one. But I can just say that I wouldn't jump to that as the first conclusion. It's easy to just jump to that. But it's wiser to try to find out what is going on and rule out obvious things.
Sure.
If you have a narrow glenoid fossa and it's easily dislocated and you've overdone your muscles from yoga, stretching, or something of this nature, then you need to address that in this life you have an anatomical constraint on your body, and you're basically weren't aware of it, and you're doing things that keep aggravating it. Okay. So that's something. And if your father had that and his father had that, I wouldn't just jump to the conclusion that some sort of incarnation. It may just be you're anatomically vulnerable to that. So like short people or tall people, that'd be the first place.
Okay. And then what about a person, let's say not anatomically or my bones per se, but I grew up in a sort of healthy life, and all of a sudden I'm having all these symptoms and issues that my parents and their parents didn't have to deal with, but a personal person that's on the personal growth path now is dealing with. Is that an inheritance of genes that those people didn't have access to certain tools, and they were really stoic and strong, and they just like, you don't go there, you don't think about it, you don't deal with it. And now a generation that has all this access to psychology tools and your work, is it possible that epigenetics wakes up issues that have been dormant in a genetic line?
The possibility, I'm assuming, is there. But when I work with people, I have people come to me in the breakthrough experience said, well, the reason I've got a knee problem is because 4 lifetimes ago I did this. Sure. And I go, possibly. I don't want to rule that out, but I don't want to just jump to that conclusion just because you had an imagination, because I've deconstructed previous life stuff on a lot of people and shown it had nothing to do with previous life. Yeah. So I have to
like
go in
and
I have to go through and find out what their dissociations and associations are and the content of their mind and what they've studied and things to really jump to that. Okay. And there's very few cases that have been documented that way. There's one young boy that's basically believed he went down in a plane crash. That's a very well documented case. It looks most real of any of them. A lot of them are just turned out to be not so. So you have to basically not just jump to that conclusion first. You want to look right in this life and find out the variables that may be inducing those reactions right in this time that have nothing to do possibly with your patterns of family or anything. So I would first start there and work my way back and see if I can find the patterns in this life and the things that are factored into this life. Then also look at vulnerabilities, look at histories of families, and if there's a pattern that goes on through there, you could be passing on epigenetic information, you could be passing on behavioral things that the parents are doing. I'll give you an example. I know a woman that has been 19 surgeries in 14 years, 19 surgeries of various parts of her body. And she jumps to the conclusion, no matter what's going on, she immediately goes to the doctor. I almost wonder about the doctor. There's a lot of organs removed now. But she has now kids, and her kids are doing the same thing. They're already starting to have surgeries, they're already starting to have health issues, or anything like that. It may be genetics, it could be epigenetics, it could also be the behavioral and the lifestyle that she lives, which I would have to say is not conducive to wellness. So which is which is not easy to discern. Okay. I don't want to jump to one. I'd keep my eyes open on all of them and ask questions and try to discern, because it's wiser to discern what's actually going on and get objective information on it than to make assumptions and then bypass something you might be able to do.
Okay, great. What's your take on why autoimmune diseases are so prevalent right now?
Well, in my observation, I'll just take an example. We had somebody who recently had an autoimmune condition, a lupus response, and we found out that we went in through and identified things where they were attacking themselves for, because autoimmune is a form of a self-antibody attack. So I look at first, what are the symptoms? What are the organs? I've seen correlations in various organs in psychology. I've seen patterns, and I go in there and try to identify what is it they may be doing where they want to attack themselves. We had a lovely lady that had urticaria, which is a histamine attack, and skin reactions. And we went and dug deeper and found out that there were some attacks on herself. It started after a certain event occurred where she didn't feel she was taking care of her family, and she let them get hurt. And that's the beginning of all the urticaria. Wow. She never had a symptom until all of a sudden she felt like she left her kids vulnerable, and they got injured, and she felt responsible, and she felt ashamed and felt like not a good mother. And her own attacking was attacking herself. And we found out what was triggering it. We found out the things that she was eating at the time when she found out about her kids going that way got associated in the brain with those shame feelings. And so anytime she would eat those things, inflammation would immediately create a reaction.
Okay. And that's one example, but that can't be the reason why there's this huge rise in autoimmune diseases right now.
If we are comparing ourselves to other people and expecting ourselves to live in other people's values, and we're beating ourselves up in the process, we would increase that response.
And would you say that's more common because
social media?
Social media, yeah.
Social media is nothing.
Each other online.
There's nothing wrong with social media. I don't want to label social media good or bad. Social media is just social media. It's a technology.
Sure.
But human beings, if they're wisely using it, it's what you do with it. Just like the internet. I live on the internet researching everything I can. I don't do a whole lot of the social stuff. I just do the research because I learn. I'm grateful for the social media and internet. But if I sat there and compared my life to other people and watched the Kardashians all day and going, I should be like that and I ought to be like this, and oh my God, I can't believe what Trump's doing, and you spend your life focusing on that, and then you're not really doing something that's highest priority and meaningful. If you don't fill your day with high priority actions and inspire, it's going to fill up with low priority distractions that don't, and you're going to self-depreciate. And self-depreciation is an autoimmune response, because the immune system and psychology correlate. Our microbiome, our immune system, our psychology, our physiology, they're not separable. The idea that they were individual systems was once taught, but now they realize that they're all intertwined and there's no way of separating them. So if you're self-depreciating, you're affecting your immune system.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you.
And also the ratio of transmitters. When I was in, I guess I was probably 24 years old, I read a book called Hormones in the Brain, and another one that was amazing brain study, where they actually took people in a psychiatric hospital with various diagnoses: bipolar, dissociative identity, multiple personality dissociations, schizophrenia, all these different labels that have changed over the years. And they went in and did an analysis of, I think, 19 different hormones and transmitters in the brain to see what the ratios were. And then they did an experiment where they found out the common patterns that were found out. This is what led to molecules of emotion, Candace-Pert's construct. Yeah. And they found out that dopamine is involved in a desire, and serotonin is in fantasy, and estrogen for nurture, these basic constructs. Well, what they did is they found these ratios, and then they took normal people that had no diagnosis, no psychological volatilities, and they changed and injected hormones into them to see what behavioral changes were happening.
Interesting.
And they found a correlation. Now, does that mean that these hormones imbalance are causing those conditions? No, not necessarily. They're correlated. They're not necessarily causal, but they're at least correlative. Now, the question is, if you find that those psychological conditions are affected by those hormones, the question now is what triggers those hormones to change?
Yeah.
Now, if all of a sudden you have an infatuation with somebody and you perceive that they're going to support your values more than challenge, your dopamine goes up, your serotonin goes up, your enkephalons go up. Now, is that because you just have an imbalance, or is that because you now have a perception of a fantasy that this person's going to provide more positives than negatives, more pleasures than pains, which is delusional, but you're in that state and you're creating a fantasy, and your chemistry is changing immediately. So the question is now, if we go and do a chemistry study, the chemistry is imbalanced. And then now you're having the behavior of manic states. So you could be diagnosed because of a temporary infatuation.
Yeah.
So they're inseparable. So I don't like to separate them out and say, well, I think in classical allopathic medicine, there was for many years an idea, psychology is a field over there. It's not really a science over there. It's kind of over there. We just look at the objective data of the chemistry. Yeah. But they tried to make the mind just the brain. There is no mind out there. There's just a brain. Well, that's fine. But there may be something beyond that. We don't know. Mm-hmm. I think there's no way that behavioral empirical science has been able to explain all of the behaviors and psychological components that a human being has. So it's still a questionable construct. Is the mind purely the brain? That's still questionable.
Yeah. Attachment theory. I've never heard you talk about attachment theory in anything you say.
Being attached to people?
Being parent attached to child. Yeah. And the power of a secure attachment when you have a safe home and it's like really nice. The studies basically show that the more secure the attachment, the more resilient the child and becomes the more competent adult, basically, something to that effect. What's your... I
think the studies are skewed on that, a little bias on that.
Yeah.
But Sir Isaac Newton, father died before he was born. His mother left him to try to find a man to take care of her and left him with some guy with an apothecary. Sir Isaac Newton became one of the greatest thinkers of times.
Sure.
If you go and take a name of 700 celebrities in various fields who have done extraordinary things, they're all orphans. So I don't know if I would go to the extent of saying that. In fact, I'm absolutely certain that that's a biased study.
Okay.
Because they want people who've been wounded by their own parents leaving will be probably driving that study to prove that no parents cause problems because they feel that they're screwed up or something. I'd be leery of that. To say that if you feel that if some mommy is going to be there for you and protect you and everything else, that's going to make your life somehow greater, I can't guarantee that. It's inside the perception of the child, because I know the parents that are really there for their children and everything else, but the child has an expectation based on another person's family of how it's supposed to be and resenting everything that you're saying is for them.
Yeah.
So you can't just put one variable. If you're there for your child, this child's going to be stable. That's not the case.
Okay. Is there a reason you don't cover the attachment those early? You don't cover the early.
No, I touch that in some of my prophecy program. I do that.
You did prophecy 1 and 2.
Yeah.
You talk about sort of the development of the embryo. Yeah. But you don't speak about the mother-child or father-child relationship much.
Well, I do. In my prophecy, I do that. Depends on the questions that come up. And in relationship talks, I definitely bring it up. There was a construct called the zeitgeist. And the construct was, and there's two schools of psychology. One is that the environment around you determines your destiny.
Yeah.
And the other is the internal environment, and how you perceive the environment around you determines your destiny. And I'm seeing that both of them have a play. But since I've been doing the breakthrough experience for nearly 3 decades, and seen people who've been through almost every imaginable thing you can imagine, from beatings to rapes to incest to killings in the family to tortures to you name it, I'm now convinced that it doesn't matter what they've been through, it's their perception of it that matters.
Yeah.
And you can change the perception and change the history of what's happened and no longer be victim of history and be a master of destiny. And since I've done that on thousands of people, the zeitgeist approach that we're a victim of our environment only, I think is a scapegoat. It's an out. It basically says that I grew up from a dysfunctional family. That's why I killed the person. That's an escape.
Yeah.
It's wiser to look at how they perceived it and then have an impact on it. Because William James said the greatest discovery of my generation is that human beings can alter their lives by altering their perceptions and attitudes of mind. I'm a believer in that you can change your perceptions, because I do it every weekend, and change the history. Their whole history that they have now shifts. The story that they run is gone. And I've seen people come to my breakthrough experience and they say, well, my mother wasn't there for me. My father was working all the time, and my uncle took care of me, and he was an alcoholic, and I'm screwed up because of all that. Really? Okay. So when your mother wasn't there, what did you miss? Okay, because you're comparing to a fantasy about how she was supposed to be there, and et cetera. Okay, and who took on that role? Well, nobody. Look again. And we dispersed it and found out there's a variety of people taking on those roles. What's the benefit of them taking on the role? What would be the drawback if your mother was taking on the role? What's the drawback of the fantasy of how it was supposed to be? And crack those delusions that they have, and all of a sudden they're in tears of gratitude for what happened.
And how it was.
And how it was.
Yeah.
And the moment they're in tears of gratitude for what happened, the physiology changes, the story changes, and their behavior changes. Because there's no longer subconscious bullshit stored in their head about how it's supposed to be. Because the way it is the way it is. Anytime you're comparing the way it is to some fantasy about how it's supposed to be that you thought it would have been better, you're going to be depressed and angry about what it is. So I went in there and I neutralized that, and the trajectory changes that day in the breakthrough experience. Changes. Yeah. Their behavior changes, what they see, what possibilities are, how they relate to relationships, changes. So if it was purely the environment by itself, we wouldn't be able to get that change. And we do it pretty well weekly. Yeah. So I don't want to negate the environment has a play for the majority of people who don't know how to master their perceptions and know how to ask the right questions to alter it. So then you would see the data to support that model, that the environment can change you. But what happens if you learn how to actually take that, no matter what happens in your life, and use it to your advantage? Yeah. To me, that's a much more empowered state. Otherwise, you're a victim of what happened genetically, epigenetically, et cetera.
Yeah. It seems like people that stay in the victim seat their whole life,
they want to use those as escape.
Because they're getting something out of it.
They're getting an advantage because that's their excuse instead of being accountable. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, I see that all the time. I see that in relationships. The reason I have a screwed up relationship is because my mother had a screwed up relationship. And I go, really? You have a brother? Yeah. Does he have a screwed up relationship? No. Well, he had the same mother. What happened?
You said I've heard you say there's no such thing as a dysfunctional family.
Yeah.
Will you just unpack that for a second?
Yeah, many years ago, 39 or so years ago, I was friends with John Bradshaw. And he's the one that created the wounded child, the dysfunctional family. He's the one who put that on the map. And he used to speak at Palmer Rehab Center there in Houston, Texas. And I used to go and listen to his lectures. And he was a brilliant guy, lovely guy. But he kind of was wounded in his own childhood. His father was an alcoholic, and a lot of crazy stuff went on in his family, he thought. And he swore that, that was evil, and he was blaming him, and he was the wounded child. And then he ended up doing everything that he condemned his father for. And I went on a Yellow Rose of Texas radio show with him years later, and we met up again, and we were doing a show together, interviewing, and he goes, I can't believe people buy into that stuff today. What I was doing when I was wounded and angry became popular selling books, and now that's not what I would teach. I was in my own wounded stage. He says, I had to learn everything that I condemned, I became, and I had to learn why, and then I am now appreciating them, and now I see it from a different light, and I realize, hey, that's not what the problem is. There's not even a problem there. It's something to be grown from. I became famous because of that. Right. So he says, and I became noted for the very thing that I was blaming for. So when he saw it from a new framing, he kind of mellowed out and kept his heart from killing him, because he had a broken heart, I think, about everything showing up like he swore he would never want to be. Yeah. So what we do is we have this stuff that happens in the early part of our life that we go around and we think that somehow it's the cause of our ailments today, but they're not. It's not necessarily the cause. It's a factor that, if it's not interpreted differently, can lead to responses, but it's not necessarily the cause. It's correlated. Because if it's purely the cause, you couldn't change it. If it's correlated, you could alter it.
So when you say there's no such thing as dysfunctional family, you're saying everyone in the family
those
role
things
are serving a purpose.
All those things that are going on in your life have a function.
Yeah.
You know, if you look very commonly, if I ask 1,000 people in an audience, how many of you have brothers and sisters that are kind of like your antiparticle, the opposite? All the hands go up. There's usually somebody in there that plays out a different role with a different set of values, and it's designed that way. And you probably have some challenges interacting with them because they have a totally different set of values. And you think, well, they've got to be more like me to be functional, or we're supposed to be peaceful all the time. That's one of the biggest delusions I see in family stuff is that you're supposed to have a peaceful family. It's supposed to get along all the time. It's supposed to be happy, and that's crazy stuff. It's childish. It's like a fantasy world. The reality is there's peace and war, and there's support and challenge, and there's cooperation and competition, and there's getting along and not getting along, and there's togetherness and separateness, and there's all kinds of pairs of opposites that you can imagine. And the summation of almost everything that people want in that family are counseling each other, and I call that love. Yeah. Love is the balance of opposites, not one-sidedness. Right. And so when people finally realize that people are going to live according to their own values, not yours, and you're going to live according to yours, not theirs, you start on a journey of finally waking up to what your family's about. It's there to teach you how to master your life and put a balance of support and challenge together. You need both support and challenge to grow.
Okay, so let me jump off that. In families is a good place to look at this, where one person in the family starts to outgrow the family system, right? And I've heard you say, there's no such thing as a person that's more spiritual than anyone else, right?
Yeah.
And yet, you don't talk about human development in stages like Ken Wilber does, or Eric Erickson, or whoever in the psychology realm. You talk, it seems like, about empowerment and empowering the 7 areas of your life. Is there any reason you don't talk about moving through stages in our life in human development?
Well, I do. There are stages. There are probabilities of behaviors. If you're a mother, 30 years old, and you're pregnant and you're about to have a baby, in all probability, you're going to go to a bookstore and get the first 12 months of life.
Yeah.
What to expect. And there's stages week by week in the development that you can expect. I don't think anybody would do it. Piaget and others, and Kohlberg and others have basically studied that. But if you're now going and you finish the first year, you go to a book on the first 5 years of life. And there's stages of first 5 years and 10 years.
Yeah.
If you're 100 years old and you went to the bookstore and you were looking and you had children in their 70s, you could probably find a pattern in the 70s. This is a pattern that you would find in your 70s.
Yeah.
So I don't want to deny that there's probable behaviors that people are going to go through. Because when you're a teenager, you're probably going to socialize and try to get and sneak out of the house and challenge things. That's normal. Yeah. Those are normal behaviors that are stages. So I don't think anybody would deny, and I certainly have never denied the idea that they're stages. I may not have emphasized it in some of the talks, but there's certain stages of life. But some people go through it sooner than others. I've seen children that get really clear about what their highest value is and get really focused on a mission at a very young age, and they're 6, 7, 8, 9. And they do things and pass through those stages way ahead of the normal age groups. So I don't want to say it's purely hormonal. I want to say there's some variables in there. But if the more congruent you are about what you really value, the more you'll pass through them and mature. That's my experience.
And so make a statement about this notion that there's no one more spiritual than you. You're not spiritual than other people. Because the spiritual people can tend to get into this mindset that I'm more spiritual. I went through that phase. And looking down upon people.
Well, that very looking down on people is not the spiritual part.
Exactly. But there's a development of consciousness, right? Like when a person really works on themselves internally deeply, they develop their consciousness, no? And they're more conscious than someone else? They're seeing the world in a bigger way?
Well, when you've been to Breakthrough,
yeah.
And in the Breakthrough experience, on Saturday night, I have you go through a series of questions, and you have to answer those questions. Yeah. And one of them is column 6 and 13 in this. And that is where you see the synchronicity of opposites.
Right.
So when somebody does a certain behavior, the complementary opposite's always present too. Mm-hmm. And those are always synchronous. And they're basically synthesized, which is the spiritual experience.
Meaning they're happening at the same time.
So no matter what a person's doing, they're part of a spiritual experience. That's what I mean.
Yeah.
And so what happens is when somebody develops, I see couples come to the program and her highest values are family and his highest value is business, let's say, stereotypical, or vice versa.
Sure.
Now, let's say he goes and he starts doing seminars on how to be more effective and efficient in business as business is growing. And then he projects his values self-righteously onto his wife and says, you know, you're not growing because you're not growing in having a business. And she's looking at him and goes, I've been developing the children and making major progress and reading books on it and everything else, and you're not. And I'm growing and you're not growing. Because you have two different value systems and you're both projecting them onto the other person, expecting them to grow in your values, not their own.
Yeah.
You don't measure somebody by another person's values. You measure by your own values on yourself, or the person's values on themselves. Now, spirituality is, what is spirituality? Is it a religion? Is it going to a church? Is it going to a temple? Is it chanting?
Yeah.
I met a man, Pat Falvey, who's a lovely gentleman, who's an adventurist, who's climbed Mount Everest 4 times the peak, the 7 top peaks of the world twice each. He's walked to the North and South Pole, and he swam the Amazon. Now, what do you call that? That's a very adventurous guy. Very rare people do that.
That's insane.
Now, his spirituality are those things.
Right.
I know another person that their spirituality is building wealth. They feel that that's an inspired thing and they have a cause. They want to do something amazing with the world by building wealth to serve the world. Everybody has a different highest value, and whatever's highest on their value is where they have the highest objectivity in the brain, where they have the most balance, the most synchronicity, and the most maturity, and the most self-governance, which is sometimes called the spiritual path. So when people are actually living congruently, they demonstrate their spirituality, and when they're comparing themselves, they're not. But it's still there. It's not missing. So that's why I say beware of labeling somebody more or less spiritual, because if you're looking up to them, you're probably going to try to inject their values in your life and try to be like them, instead of honor who you are, which is expressing your spirituality. Yeah. So beware of the labels. You know, I see this all the time. My guru is better than your guru, and my religion. The other day I had a young man in a program that believed that his religion was right, and every single thing about his religion was right, and every other religion was wrong. Very black and white. Yeah. And I pointed out to him, I pulled up a list of the Old Testament of all the killings that went on from Yahweh, basically. And there's 25 million people that Yahweh killed. And I said, well, so what do you think about the killing of that? Because that goes against the thing of killing, you know? I was teasing him. Yeah. And he says, well, all those people were evil people, and my God got rid of those to make a good world. I went, okay. So his idea was spirituality is what his belief is. Uh-huh. So I've studied comparative religions, 3,000 different religions over the last 35, 40 years. And I'm less likely to say that's more spiritual or less spiritual. I think, are you grateful? Do you have love? Are you inspired by your mission? Are you contributing to the planet? To me, that's just a spiritualist sitting and chanting and doing some sort of ritual.
Yeah, totally. Okay, great. The one and the many. I want to just talk about that for a minute. So people in an intimate relationship can depend on one another, and that can be totally fine and healthy. And other times people can depend on someone and it feels like a little too invasive and too much. It seems like we're both independent and dependent inside, because we're mammals and we depend on each other for our survival. And you are really independent, you could say, on the outside, right? You're like just doing your mission. Yet it seems like you are probably pretty dependent on your team or whoever to run your business so that you can do this, right?
Yeah.
Is that true?
Yeah.
Is that
I have
fair?
both.
Okay.
I would say you never have one without the other.
Yeah.
You're not going to have the independence. If you're financially independent, that means you're dependent on the people managing your money.
Right. Exactly.
Yeah, I'm an independent person in the sense of I do what I love to do each day, research, write, travel, teach, but I'm dependent on a whole lot of people that make that possible for me. So I don't have one without the other. In relationships, the same thing. You're going to have an independence and a dependence.
Yeah. So the question for me is, the tricky question is that people ask a lot is it okay to depend on someone for our fulfillment?
Well, there's a difference between complete dependence, where it's an addiction to such a degree that you will kill yourself if they don't do it. Mm-hmm. I've seen those extremes. It's just basic on degree. If you go to an extreme degree of where somebody is, well, I had a case in Johannesburg about 1.5 years ago, where a lady was attending my training program, and she just broke up with her boyfriend, and the boyfriend was texting her saying, I'm going to kill myself if you don't come back to me. Okay, now,
Yeah,
he probably would,
intense.
if he was really going to kill himself, he'd probably just kill himself. He wouldn't tell her that.
Yeah.
That's a strategy on his part to try to get her back, a little game, emotional blackmail kind of game to get her back, trying to. But she didn't want to go back. But she didn't want to have him kill himself and feel like she's responsible. I said to her, I said, you're not responsible for his death. His own dependencies and his own extreme infatuation with you is leading to those outcomes. And you're not responsible for that. You can't let that person run your life. You can suggest he go get help. You can do like that, but you can't run your life that way.
Yeah.
Because everybody that comes along and does that with you could do that. So I told her, I said, if I were you, and this goes against some people are frightened about doing what I'm about to say.
Okay.
But I said, thank him on the text. Say, thank you for confirming your dependency on me. And if you have nothing else to live for but me, that is confirming my decision of why I've moved on, because you have nothing to live for. And that's a weight on and a burden to my shoulders. And I want to be with somebody that has a life, that's inspired, that wants to go places and do things, contribute to a relationship. But if you have nothing to live for but to me, then I'm carrying you around as a weight. And you've confirmed that my decision is the wisest. Mm-hmm. If you choose to take your life, I respect that. But I'd rather you not. I'd rather you live your life to the fullest and help you go forward in life and do something amazing in your life. If you did, we might come across paths again someday. But right now, that's not. You've just confirmed that I made the right decision.
Yeah.
And so, she sends that back, and he says, no, I'm serious. I'm really going to kill myself. And she says, well, if so, thank you. I can say that I've had some really great times with you and some that are not so great, but thank you for what we've had together. Appreciate it. And then she went like that. And he says, actually he didn't know, but she actually could trace where he was in his car. She had a locator. I don't know how it works.
Okay.
But anyway, so he was at a Woolworths store in shopping as he was texting. So if he was really planning to kill himself. Well, anyway, the day went by, the week went on, 2 weeks went by. And then he decided to come to the seminar that I was at, thinking that if he comes to the seminar where she happens to be at, then he's going to get back. And then she said, no, I'm not getting back with you until you get your life together. And if you get back that, I can't guarantee that, because right now I'm enjoying my life being apart. And she just kept doing it. And gradually he grew and he started re-empowering his life, and then thanked her for finally making him independent, standing up more independent. Yeah. So he had an extreme polarity there, and it was brought back into balance. But it took about a year and a half to get him back into balance.
I know for me in a partnership, there's dependency on my wife and her on me in a way that feels really.
Well, you're delegating lower priority things to her, and she's delegating lower priority things to you, and you're both working on getting things done. That's great. That can be a great relationship. But there's a difference between ionic relationships that have valencies and charges, and there's parts of more dependencies, and what I call covalent relationships or allovalent relationships, where you're both empowered in all areas of your life, and you're sharing your life together.
Yeah.
It's not like I have a girlfriend right now. She's extremely brilliant. She's one of the brightest girls that I've come across. She's got a very large business. She's definitely financially savvy. She's got social influence. She's got 4 beautiful children. She's a very attractive woman, definitely a model type, and she's inspired. I mean, she's inspired, visionary. Okay, she's got power in all areas. She doesn't need me. I'm empowered in all areas. I don't need her, but we definitely love being together.
Yeah.
We fulfill each other, but sometimes we're away from each other for months. We don't see each other. We just chat with each other on Skype. But there's more of a covalent dynamic where we're both sharing in that process instead of I can't live without this part. So there's degrees of that, from extreme polarities where there's a dependency and you couldn't live without them, to a point where you can live with them or without them and you come and go free.
Yeah. Okay. The one in the many piece that I wanted to bring in there was the single people. I've heard you have this great frame that I'm single, let's say, and I'm lamenting the fact that I don't have a partner, but I got a great community and all these friends that are sort of meeting the same need, but it's just in the form of many versus one. And as long as I keep having that form, it's maybe less likely that I'll meet the one. You say, is it something like that? Or
well, that's a little bit of a tweak to it. When I have people come up to me and says, I'm desperate, I got to find my soulmate, I got to get my soulmate, what's wrong with me, I can't seem to get my soulmate. And I go, okay, let's make a list of everything you're looking for in a soulmate. And I make them make this exhaustive list of what their kind of their fantasy is.
Yeah.
And make a list of it. And then I said, now, everybody's got both sides, nice, mean, kind, cruel, positive, negative, support, challenge. So make the opposite list. Because you're never going to get this without this.
Yeah.
You know, if I went up to you and I said, you're always nice, you're never mean, you're immediately bullshit meter would go off and go, I'm both.
Yeah.
So you don't get one-sided people, and that's fantasy. And you're not going to find a soulmate looking for a one-sided person because you're going to keep running into the other side and you do, this isn't working, this isn't my soulmate, because the soulmate is a fantasy.
Yeah.
That's not how you get anywhere. So first write down everything you're looking for, everything you don't want. That's what you're about to get. that's what it, you know, they may be highly intelligent, but they may like to argue with you.
Yeah.
The peccadillos come with the things you admire. And over time, you eventually discover those two sides of each trait. Because no trait is good or bad. It's just a trait that's neither good nor bad until you've narrowed your mind and made it so. And that's why you're attracted or repelled from it. So once you actually take the trait and identify what you're looking for and the opposite, now next to that trait, who's providing that in your life right now? This is an eye-opener, people.
Yeah, because nothing's missing, right?
Nothing's missing. So you go in there and identify who's providing that trait right now, one or many, male or female, close or distant, who's providing that trait. And you do it until it matches the quantity that you're searching for, that you think you want, and quality. And dig. You have to dig and stretch your mind, and you'll find out that you have a network of people, one or many, male or female, that is actually playing that role out, close or distant. And you go, whoa. And then you take the trait, the anti-trait, the opposite trait, and go find out where that's going, and you realize, oh. And you could actually trace that through time and find out that that's changing, but there's always that trait in your life. It's changing, it's morphing with different people, but it's there. Once you're aware of that, you realize nothing's missing, and you're not desperate, which is a more empowered position.
And that's the charged negative spot, right?
Yeah, because otherwise nobody wants a desperate person.
Yeah.
So what happens is you now have a realization that you have created that outcome according to your values. And your hierarchy of values is creating it in that form. Mm-hmm. Now, if you do that, that's an eye-opener. The second one is, now if you say you want a mate in one person, this special one man, what you have is probably a history. I'm just using a woman because it could be looking for one woman. Sure. You have a history of a series of relationships that were one person that was wounding you in your mind. So you have somebody, let's say I got this really nice looking guy, but he played around. Or I got this really wealthy guy, but he's controlling me. Or I got this person that was really, really good looking and great lover, but he had no drive and he just sat around the house and didn't do anything. So there was a flaw in your fantasy not being met, you might say. Mm-hmm. And then you associate that as painful. And so you unconsciously say, oh, I don't want to go and do that type of person again. Yeah. So what you've done is you've got the same trait that person provided, but now in another person that's not going to reject you. So now you got a friend that provides that, highly intelligent, good looking, or whatever friends that's providing it, but you don't have to fear of rejection or you don't have to fear they're having an affair because you're not attached to it. Mm-hmm. So you unconsciously, with your value system, structure what you're creating without even realizing it. And unless you clear those wounds, you're less likely to be open to having one person provide it because every time you've been with one person, these wounds show up.
Yeah, you get hurt.
You get hurt. So you're protecting yourself unconsciously, even though, and the people that are claiming, oh, I want my soulmate, I want to find this person, usually have the most wounds. Yeah. Because they're desperate and they're holding onto a fantasy. So I've had many cases where I've actually done the exercise, gone in there and gone through 3 or 4 people that they've been the wounded on, not because of what the person did, but their perceptions and expectations wounded them. Clear all that and see where they're empowered, and all of a sudden not even search for it. They feel like, hey, it's working. Mm-hmm. And then they run into the person. Yeah. When they're doing what they love to do. Yeah. You're more likely to get a mate that matches you when you're being yourself. Mm-hmm. Going and trying to go to a club and putting on a facade and trying to find a person that's going to match you is probably the least probable way of doing it.
Yeah, absolutely. Enlightenment. Will you say something about sort of the Eckhart Tolle's type people of the world that are promoting, it seems to me, if I just meditate hard enough, I can get into a state and my problems sort of go away and I'm in this non-dual place and I'm one with the universe and everything's all good. Like, can you speak to, can you debunk that a little bit? I've heard you do it in a number of ways.
What I would do, I'd be leery about that because I've had the opportunity to meet quite a few gurus over the years. A lot of them fall over time. 2 of them recently in India. 2 of the biggest just fell in India. In my observation of human behavior, you have moments where you are truly mindful, truly graced, truly inspired, truly present, and you're in that great moment of enlightenment. I believe that moments of enlightenment or inspiration definitely occur. I don't think that anybody would question that. That can occur in a person's life. And there are certain things you can do to increase the probability of those occurring. But I also know that the person who's now having this moment of enlightenment, if you will, they don't just stay there. Maybe if they have a career that does that, they might have a higher frequency because they're getting paid to do that, and that's their livelihood, or they have inherited enough money where they don't have to work and they do the dedication to that. But when you actually get to meet people that have a high degree of that, they still have functions. They still have challenges in their life. They push their buttons and emotional reactions. I've yet found a person, not one person, that doesn't have emotional reactions and frustrations and aggravations, etc. But a lot of people put on a facade because they're trapped in an idealism that they're supposed to, as a guru or something. But when you actually get down to really hang out with them, they're just human beings. And I've seen some that have put on great facades for the majority of people, but I've known them, and they're just human beings. I think it's a disservice for any guru or any spiritual teacher to give people the misunderstanding and the fantasy that you're going to get enlightened, you're going to stay in light, and there'll be bliss, and you'll be done. I think that's, I use the analogy, if you don't mind me going off on this. I imagine the Earth spinning around. It takes 24 hours, 86,400 seconds. And let's say you're sitting in a lotus position on some place near the equator of the Earth, maybe somewhere in the equator. And you're just sitting there in the lotus position and you're meditating and you're in a bliss. And you're going around the Earth. And you stay there for a few hours. And eventually you have to go and urinate or other things, or maybe some consuming of food, or maybe talk to somebody, and life goes on. And not everybody's going to support everything you do, and not everybody's going to challenge what you do. But you're going to go through and have emotions. But let's say you actually think you have pure enlightenment, universal enlightenment. I would rather say that I have a relative degree of awareness and I'm poised for a moment based on the level of information that's in my mind. And it's very limited. Because from the center from the sun, 93 million miles away, 1 astronomical unit away from the Earth, if you were to stand on the sun and look at the Earth spinning around, you would see that person caught in a squirrel cage going around thinking he's enlightened, swirling around in that little Earth spinning. And they would think, I'm all enlightened, I'm aware, I'm all enlightened, I know everything, I'm a fully universal consciousnness. And it's a speck. It's not even visible from the sun. Now the sun is 28,000 light years away from the center of the Milky Way, near Sagittarius A cluster. And from the center of all those clusters, looking out the Milky Way, it's barely discernible. It's just a little kind of, looks like a star kind of thing, maybe swirling star. And then that is part of a Laniakea supercluster. And that's a vast cluster that's going towards a super attractor. And that's part of a tiny little plasma filament of a bigger part of the astronomy. And that's a tiny little speck on the edge of a ball, a sphere of a foam, the bubble bath theory of cosmology, in just the observable universe. And the observable universe is not even a speck in compared to the entire universe that we suspect is there. And so when somebody says, I am all enlightened and I am all universally aware, I think that's probably the sign of a non-enlightened state. Because I think Einstein said it better when he says, it's wise to continually live in holy curiosity. And it's enough for me on a daily basis to sit in awe, contemplating whatever level of intelligence of the universe I can perceive at that moment, and continue to grow. Because if you think that you don't have anything to grow through and anything to learn, and you think you're fully enlightened, I think that that's a disservice to you and anybody you teach. I'd rather consistent, because I'm studying every single day. I'm reading and learning and studying and meditating and doing things. And I have more knowledge today and more understanding today and more awareness today than I did 20 years ago. So I think that the pure enlightenment and bliss and you're going to peace and everything else is a complete misunderstanding of how the world's working.
You meditate?
Yeah, I do meditation.
Why do you meditate?
I find that meditation I can sort through and read a bunch of things, and I can sometimes meditate and get poised, and sometimes I can sort through and make sense out of things and see the order of things that I might not see. Sometimes I'll meditate because it allows me to get less sleep necessity. I can get by on a few hours of meditation because I may be flying a red-eye flight to go and speak when I land, and I've got only 4 hours, 5 hours, and I can meditate, use that for better sleep patterns. I have many reasons why I might meditate. I have many types of meditations I might use for different functions. Yeah.
Can you train the body to, seems like just a quick question on sleep, to need less sleep over time?
Yeah, I did over 35 years on 4-hour sleep. And just more recently, since I'm now in my 60s, I've required more sleep because sometimes I have to get up in the middle of the night and, get to urinate a little bit because that's part of the 60s, I guess. But I don't sleep as much as, or I don't sleep as well as I did, not because of necessarily emotional stuff, although that can be there. It's just that I sometimes have to get up and I have to pass urine, and then I sometimes take 15 minutes to go back to bed.
Yeah.
And so I'm now sleeping a little bit long to compensate for those capacities. And that's not uncommon in people in their 60s. So, but I know that people can get by on less sleep, and I train myself to do that, and I've been doing that for many years.
Just a training tip for the listener, whether we want to read more books or meditate or sleep less or to be more productive, is there it seems like a hack that is, how do we train, what's like one tip to train because it seems like it might be about perceptions. Like if I tell myself a story, I need 8 hours of sleep, I'm going to need 8 hours of sleep. Is some of that in how I talk to myself?
Well, no, part of it, it's not just what you're saying. When it comes to sleep, because I've had people say, I'd like to sleep less, what do we do? And I tell them, we find out their sleep patterns. We get some and identify. There's ways of little apps that do sleep patterns. Find out the sleep patterns. Certain sleep patterns, you wake up, you'll feel groggy. Certain patterns, you wake up, you'll feel fine. Almost everybody's probably got up in the middle of the night and felt really great, and then went back to sleep and woke up later with 3 hours sleep and felt groggy, because there's patterns and cycles in the sleep. So knowing what the patterns are and the cycles and when they're occurring is a good start. Then what I do is I tell people to incrementally at 15 minutes shorter. So just cut off 15 minutes and give it at least a month until your body readjusts. Mm-hmm. And it'll readjust its patterns. It's literally patterns and cycles. And once you've done that, and it's now normal, you don't think anything about it, because when the people were in the Marines and the Army, and you only had 4 hours sleep, and you had to do full days work. Yeah. And they had to train you for the real life of being at war. And these people within 3 months adjusted, and they got by in 4 hours sleep. And they got trained and they were adjusted, and their body clocks readjusted. So we have the capacity to do that. And so you can incrementally do it in about 15-minute increments and just keep going back and get it, and your body will adjust quite nicely. The idea that you have to have 8 hours sleep, I don't know. Donald Trump, I've known him for many, many years. He doesn't sleep 8 hours. He sleeps 4 to 5. I've slept 4 hours. Harvey McKay, 4 hours. Many of the people I know that do extraordinary feats and stuff and really do a lot and accomplish a lot, they don't sleep 8 hours a day. They got too much to do. And some of them live to 80, 90, 100 years old. I have a guy right now, he sleeps 4 hours a day. He's 88. He runs a major corporation, but he doesn't sleep 4 hours a day. Right. So I can't say that it's just everybody has to do this. You can readjust it, and if you have a motive. You also don't need as much sleep if you're inspired. If you know you have something tomorrow that's absolutely inspiring, you can get by on less sleep and just go. But if you have nothing going for you and you're unfulfilled and things are not working the way and you're perceiving things in a way, not because it actually is, but you're perceiving it that way, you're going to feel like, oh, drained. I need sleep.
I can't wait to get to bed.
I need to escape. And so dreams are escape mechanisms. Yeah.
Cool. Last couple of questions here, just random ones about the economy right now, like cryptocurrency, economies, like just quick thoughts on what are you noticing? What are you seeing?
Well, I got interviewed on cryptocurrencies a few months back, about 5 months ago, and my statement was that they're going to be highly volatile. There's no intrinsic value in them yet. The real growth rate is not the emotional sentiment that people are putting into it, but the actual usage. Yeah. And as you see, I think Stripe and Korea, and there's organizations shutting it off now because it's too volatile, and
its value is going down.
So it's kind of being squashed a bit. So the blockchain construct and that technology is going to be around. I don't think that's going anywhere. I think that there's probably going to be some currencies that are going to come around, but which one? There's hundreds of them now. Yeah. So I certainly don't invest in that. That's not my thing. I make good returns. I'm financially independent. I've bought companies. If I'm going to invest in something, I'm going to invest in a company that I believe that 10, 20, 30, 40, or 50 years from now is still going to be serving people, the best of my ability. 34 plus years ago, I bought a peanut butter company because I ate peanut butter. That company was here before I was born. That company's still here 60-something years later, and it will probably be here 60 years later because people still eat peanut butter. Right. That may not be the healthiest peanut butter, but it's peanut butter, and around the world, people use peanut butter. So if I was going to buy a company, I would rather do something that serves vast numbers of people and will continue with a population growth to serve vast numbers of people, that is consistent commodity or company that has little turnover, doesn't have to keep up with all the IT technologies, and makes a product that's a great product that lasts. Yeah. So I would rather invest in something that serves vast numbers of people, because the real fulfillment of investing is the ability to contribute to the world and getting the rewards of that contribution. Yeah. When you're gambling and you're speculating on things about where it's going, you might make a killing, you might not. But I don't think you need to speculate extremely in order to become very financially viable and wealthy. I certainly haven't done all these wild speculations. I've just been consistent tortoise, investing consistently and increasing my investments consistently for 34, almost 35 years. And I made financial independence, and I could go the rest of my life and not work and live on my ship and spend $1 million a year for the rest of my life, and there's no way I could spend it. Yeah. And that's because I just kept buying quality companies over time and shares in companies.
Yeah, and you save.
I saved so I could buy that, and I bought properties too.
Sure.
If you're going to buy properties, buy quality properties, same thing. Buy something that's going to stand the test of time, and your finances will stand the test of time.
And by the way, I've been saving since I did your prophecy program many years ago. 10%, and doing my little by little. It's been awesome.
If you consistently do that and you increase it just a little bit periodically to stretch you, you'd be surprised what you do. People, I have yet to find. I was doing a program in Sydney, Australia, what I call my Master Planning for Life program, where we sit down for 3 days and plan. Yeah. And have foresight and think about what it is, because nobody's getting up in the morning and dedicating their life to your fulfillment. It's only you. And if you don't do it, you're going to be living by hindsight and trial and error instead of foresight and mentorship. So we're doing this program, and there's 120 people attending it in Sydney, Australia. It's at the Swiss Hotel. And I asked people, just out of curiosity, about the second day, I said, how many of you attended my prophecy program, which is about becoming a prophet of your own destiny, taking command of your life and deciding your life? Mm-hmm. And 87 people out of 120 had put their hand up, had attended the program. And I said, just out of curiosity, because somebody had just come up to me and said it changed their life. I said, out of that 87 people, how many of you initiated your savings, put it on automatic pilot, and increased it like I told you to do, and started moderating it and started learning and educating yourself? How many of you did it? 84 people out of 87 put their hands up.
Wow. And
I wasn't expecting, I thought 40, 50 maybe.
Right.
87 That's people, huge. 84 of the 87 people had done it. And I said, and how many, when you stop and factor in how much you put into that course, that means staying in hotels, the food you'd be doing anyway, but the staying in the hotels, the transport, and the cost of the program, how many of you have multiplied that? Tell me your multiple that you've returned on that, on what you have saved more than what you would have had if you hadn't done that.
Yeah.
And those multiples were in some cases 1,000, in some cases hundreds, some cases just tens. Yeah. So when you do something that stands the test of time and works, you get the rewards of that. And finance is just one of the areas of life. We're here to master them all. Just like you're helping people master their relationships, that's just as crucial as finance. Because you can build a lot of fortune and then destroy your relationship and it cuts in half. Yeah. That's not a wise approach. Right. But you want to master them all. Any area of life we don't empower, somebody's going to overpower. And finance is just one of them. I'm trying to help people empower their life. That's my objective.
Yeah, thank you. So as you know or may not know, I started the relationship school because I'm on a mission to help 1 million young people get this skill on how to work out our differences. And because I never got this in high school and I'm just fired up to do it. And I always ask my guests, if you were to whisper in my ear and I had 1,000 teens or young adults, and I could only teach them one thing about relationships, intimate relationships specifically, what would you impart to me to tell them?
Very simple, even though it's going to be probably take a minute. Every human being wants to be loved and appreciated for who they are, not who you want them to be. So if you don't know what they value most, which is what their identity revolves around, you're going to probably project expectations based on your own values onto them and run into resistance and label them instead of actually learn to love them. Mm-hmm. So the wisest thing to do is to first find out what they're really committed to. Because the only thing you can ever expect another human being to do is to be committed and to fulfill what is highest on their values. Mm-hmm. You can't expect me to do something other than to research, write, travel, teach. That's what I love doing. So if I have a girlfriend that expects me to do anything else, she's going to be disappointed because she's expecting me to live in her values, not mine, or somebody else's value, or some idealism. So first find out what they really value. Find out who they are really, truly committed, what they're committed to and who they really are. Once you identify that, just know that if you think that what your values are better than theirs, you're not a match. You're looking down on them, and you're not going to respect them. You want to find somebody you respect. Don't rush into a relationship till you have a respect, whether you feel that you're equal. You can banter with each other when you do that. You keep each other in check, which is a healthier state. Then you want to ask how specifically is what they're dedicated to, their top 3 highest values. How is it helping you fulfill what you're dedicated to, your top 3? Because you need to know yourself and find out how what they're doing is serving you. And then you want to turn around and ask how is what you're dedicated serving them, and make as many links as you can, 20, 30, 40, 50, 80 links, and have a really linking process of who they're committed, what they're committed to, how's it serving you? Because if you can see what they're dedicated to is serving you, you're going to honor them, you're going to love them for who they are, and you're going to encourage them to be who they are. And if somebody does that, why would they leave? They're fulfilling what they dream. Now, they're going to make decisions in a relationship based on what they think is going to give them the greatest advantage or disadvantage. If they feel that they're being loved and appreciated who they are by being with you, not supported, but loved, which means you can banter with them. But if you can help them fulfill that, they're always comparing what else options out there. And if they don't see something that's going to help them fulfill their values more than you, they're going to be with you. So if you want a lasting relationship, don't put it on them to commit to you. Do it on you to commit to mastering the skill of communicating what you value in terms of what they value and helping them fulfill what they value in life. If you do, they're probably not going anywhere.
Great. Thank you. Where can people find out more about you? And you have so many programs and amazing starting points. I'd obviously recommend the Breakthrough Experience. You teach all over the world, so that's pretty easy for people to get to you somehow.
Yeah, I go all over the place. The best way to do it is just go to my website, drdemartini.com, drdemartini.com. And on there's a lot of stuff. I mean, you can go and determine your values, complimentary. You can go in there and look on media, and you can see literally hundreds of thousands of radio shows, interview shows, magazines, newspapers, TV, articles, you name it. Then there's YouTube channels, and there's educational and inspirational writings. It's an educational website. But if you go on there, it also shows where I am on the events and what I'm doing in the events around the world. So you just hit events, look for the dates, and you'll see where I am. That's not everything I'm doing. Like this isn't on there. Some interviews are not on there, and some, but my main presentations that are public, my privates usually aren't on there, but the public ones they can do, and they can find out where I'm doing the breakthrough. I do the breakthrough experience about 40 plus times a year, and they can find out where I'm at, and they can join me.
Great.
Or they can get on my webinars. I had a webinar today. They can join me on the webinars.
I like seeing that you're doing more of that, by the way.
Yeah, I'm doing it once a month on the webinars. I do a lot of podcasts. I do probably 15 podcasts, 20 podcasts a month. And so they can keep up with me just by going on the website. Best way to do it.
drdemartini.com.
Yeah, and Facebook also, we have information going on there, and we have some connections. But Facebook and the website are probably the best ways to go.
Okay, cool. John, thanks so much.
Thank you.
Yeah. Okay, pretty jam-packed, right? I love talking to this guy. And more importantly, I like listening to this guy. And sometimes John will talk for 4 hours straight. I've been to a number of his courses where he talks for 4 hours. Seriously, without a pause. And he's just such a wealth of knowledge. And I encourage you to check him out, drdemartini.com. And he's got loads of resources on his website. And I especially recommend, I found some really good audios of him on iTunes. Just go to iTunes, the store, and put his name in the search bar, John Demartini. And there's a number of different audio programs he has that are outstanding. So if you want to go a little deeper with John, start there. And it's really affordable on iTunes. The next step is to go to his Breakthrough Experience. He leads these every single weekend of the year, all over the year. And the guy is a beast. He'll just plan on being there at 8 a.m. and go until at least midnight on Saturday, and almost the same on Sunday. So he just delivers, and he's an inspiration to me in so many ways. And yes, he's got his drawbacks, and things that I haven't learned from him that I learn elsewhere, of course, like any person. And I just don't know any other polymath quite like this character. Okay, so action step, other than checking out John and his work, also be sure to go check out the podcast interview I did with him a while back, episode number 60, The Keys to Mastering Relationships with Dr. Demartini. Okay, check out that episode. Relationshipschool.net podcast/podcast 60. Okay, if you want to listen to that one, if you want more of this type of interview. All right, another action step. He said something really, so many brilliant things, but check this one out. You only have control over 3 things in your life: perceptions, decisions, and actions. So write that down. That's your action step. I only have control over these 3 things in my life: my perceptions, my decisions, and my actions. And then commit to changing your perceptions on how you see your ex-partner, how you see life, how you see other people that are out to get you. Change your perceptions. Okay, it's one of the most powerful things this man taught me. The power to change perception. And I think any good practitioner, healer that's done their homework on how human beings work and psychology understands perceptions and the power of perceptions. Okay? Check that out. Do that action step. All right. Finally, come join us here at the Relationship School. There's a couple of ways you can enter right now, since a lot of our courses are closed. You can join the free group. Go to Facebook, which you're probably on right now, and type in the search bar Smart Couple Monogamy Facebook group and ask to join. That's free. There's over 4,000 people in there like you and me who want to grow and develop through relationship. All right? Totally free. And then our membership community, the Relationship School Roots community, because we want to get the roots dialed before this big relationship tree grows tall and strong. Okay, you got to have a foundation. And the Roots is our foundational community. And that costs you $47 a month, or if you pay annually, it's $31 a month. And that gets you so much. You get 2 classes, you get access to practice partners and a Facebook group. It's an awesome community, all right? And we meet twice a month, every other Wednesday, okay? So please join us. It's an awesome place to practice if you want to take these types of interviews and skills and action steps further in the context of community, and to get feedback on how you're showing up, and to also ask questions about your relationship life and get really good practical advice, okay? relationshipschool.net/roots, and we'll see you in there. And thanks again, everyone. Here's to a strong partnership.